What's good? I've been uploading less, I noticed. I've been doing some shorts and stuff, but in terms of actual content, I've really pulled back. Not really intentionally. More so it's a byproduct of my growth, I feel like, in my opinion. And so that's like me addressing how easily susceptible I am to the outrage cycle. In other words, I look at the news, I look at the propaganda, and I let it aggravate me, or I used to let it aggravate me. However, uh, even though for a decade to 15 years, I've known the system is broken, the system is corrupt, it's evil to the core. There is no salvaging the system of modernity that we live in, or civilization. Our planet is poisoned physically, mentally, and spiritually. And that manifests in the global structures that oppress humanity. And so when you embody and embrace that notion and redirect or transmute the energy into just doing whatever you can as an individual to resist and to contribute to the, you can call it the awakening, you can call it the new earth, you could call it a new renaissance if you want to be less spiritual and a little more material or philosophical. I like the idea of a new renaissance. That's like what the new earth is, in my opinion. And so, another example is the shooting. There was a shooting that happened, I believe, at Brown College. And, the media, if the suspect or the is of a certain skin complexion, they will plaster their information immediately after the incident. But if the suspect does not fit a convenient narrative, then they'll wait. And that's what they're doing in the Brown situation. We don't have many details. And historically, that would frustrate me. But because I have shirts, check the description below, not everything is a psyop, but most things are. And when you realize that and you accept that, which is hard to do because it's really hard to acknowledge that the structures of society are corrupt and broken and intentionally designed to poison your mind, it's really hard to accept that. I get it, which is why so many people resist, why so many people just continue to buy the narratives from the propaganda machine. And so not everything is a psyop, but most things are. The shooting, it's very tragic that it happened, and I'm sorry to the families. It's hard to talk about this stuff because they're not going to want to hear that pedophilic globalist elites are manufacturing violence and manufacturing division to intentionally destabilize society. They don't want to believe that. They don't want to hear that. They just, they want justice, and I understand so, but it's so much bigger than just a single shooting. Whether or not the shooting was actually a deranged individual or a government agency creating a false flag, and we should want justice. Unfortunately, in this super convoluted reality that we're living in, we're not going to get justice. Well, and I'm not saying that because it's like, it sucks to say that, actually. It really sucks to say that, but that is why, in my opinion, the best way to resist is to persist. It means to continue living, to continue seeking self-actualization, to continue seeking joy and pleasure and happiness and community and things that bring light to the planet. But to do so, getting away from the system as much as you can. Why I'm hugely an advocate for going off grid, Because if you go off grid, you're getting away from the cities where so much of the violence and destabilization is occurring. But then you're also not paying taxes into the system that perpetuates said violence and destabilization. And so if you truly want to resist the system, it's not about fighting it head on. It's not about getting into office yourself and changing, because we're not going to change the direction of the current ship. The ship is sinking. We need to let the ship sink. The universal age-old tale of death and rebirth. It's a universal cycle. We need to allow for this modernity to self-destruct, which it will do, and I think I said this in other videos. I think we're 40 to 300 years, and I know that's a huge span, but when you're trying to, I don't want to use this word, but it came into my head, so forgive me because I'm just going to let it flow. When you're trying to prophesize the downfall of an elite class, an evil elite class that has been manipulating humanity for thousands of years, there's going to be some wiggle room. And forecast would be a better word. Let's stick with the forecast word. I am attempting to forecast the best trajectory we as humans can build for the rehabilitation of the planet. And to me, we're 40 to 300 years away from it. And what ultimately will happen will be that self-destruction. The elite classes will continue to consolidate power and resources. And the more that consolidation happens, the more authoritarian things are going to become. And eventually, there will be some form of collapse. I hope. That's kind of what I pray for. And then, as things are collapsing, I use the expression, we kind of return to the planet. Or, we can move from our off-grid, isolated communities back into the greater spaces of the planet, of the globe. And I've never been one to be interested in like mystery schools and all of that esoteric stuff. I do think I'm a somewhat spiritual person, but not in an esoteric way. Hidden things don't appeal to me. I believe that truth and transparency should be like brought to the planet, which is the opposite of esoteric, which is hidden, right? But maybe along the way we uncover hidden knowledge and then share it with the rest of the planet. That's part of the journey, maybe, potentially. That's not my strong suit. I'm more about philosophy. But, I think any person who is big into philosophy has some level of spiritual connection too, because you cannot, in my opinion, ponder the nature of reality without including or exploring divinity, numinosity, just this idea of a realm beyond the material. I mean, you can. There are philosophy branches that think all that's woo-woo, and that's fine, but I think most people interested in philosophy are also interested in spirituality. It's connected. And then maybe a little bit of psychology, but we won't get into that. The psychology is one way the ruling class manipulates us, because they understand psychology very well, which is how so many people have been brainwashed. This at all was not the direction I intended this video to go. I wanted to talk about 2026 and the goals that we, should be focusing on getting locked in. But here we are talking about Psyops. So ultimately, as we move forward, the message, and like I said, check the description for shirts. Not everything is a Psyop, but most things are. If you have not been directly affected by a Psyop, don't let it take your attention. Redirect your attention onto your mission, your contribution to building the new Earth, or the second Renaissance, whatever vibes or resonates more with you. That's what 2026 is about. It's about even more progress and growth and divestiture from the matrix. I'll wrap up the video there. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Much love.